I want to get back to the Trayvon Martin case. The shooter, George Zimmerman, has his first court appearance. That is next hour. He is accused of second-degree murder. Now, prosecutor Angela Corey says that public outrage over the killing of this unarmed teenager did not factor in her decision.
Let me emphasize that we do not prosecute by public pressure or by petition. We prosecute based on the facts of any given case, as well as the laws of the state of Florida.
Martin Savage, he's been covering this. He's in Sanford, Florida. So what are we going to see? Are we actually going to see George Zimmerman in court today?
I believe we are, actually, the way it's set up, and it's gone back and forth as far as the explanation. But inside of the correctional facility behind me, which is where George Zimmerman's being held, is apparently a courtroom. And he will appear inside of that courtroom as part of his first appearance, the arraignment. Charges will be read against him by the judge. The judge, actually, will be in another building, and the two will be connected by a television set. We know it's second-degree murder. We expect to hear a plea of not guilty coming from George Zimmerman. The other question to be answered is, what about the issue of bond? His attorney, Mark O'Mara, says that it could become complicated, so it may not be dealt with immediately at this first appearance. It could require another hearing. We'll have to wait and see.
And this first appearance does not involve the Martin family. Is that correct?
No, it doesn't. And in fact, it's a very limited number of people that will be allowed. The media will gain access. Actually, there'll be a television camera that will be allowed to peer into the courtroom where George Zimmerman is. There'll also be someone from still photography and one reporter, I believe, again, allowed to watch from a specially built viewing room.
Martin, do you know anything about his first night in custody?
Well, you know, he had to be transported from Jacksonville. It was the Jacksonville area where he turned himself in when he understood that there was charges filed against him. That would have been about a 3-hour drive when he showed up here at the corrections facility. There was quite a gathering of journalists that were waiting to catch a glimpse as he went inside. After that, then you have, you know, a lot of office work that has to be done, the photograph that was taken, the mugshot. Then there's a medical exam, a mental exam that's done, determining how you're going to house him. We understand that he is being held in isolated confinement and that his attorney got to meet with him for at least an hour, and he described that George Zimmerman appeared to be very tired and very stressed, and that's one of the reasons he wants to get him out on bond as soon as possible to try to help him in that regard and also to begin building the case.
Is it possible that he could be released today if he makes bond, if they set and he makes bond?
Right. You know, I'm not an expert on that, but I have read a lot of material, and there seems to be the issue that, you know, it's complicated because right now he doesn't have a bond. And so the attorney is going to ask that there will be a bond. He'll say, look, he's not a risk for flight. He turned himself involuntarily. So those are all good points in his favor. However, the judge, you know, if they haven't worked it out ahead of time, may require a separate hearing, and that could take some time. We also, though, could learn perhaps a bit of insight into what evidence the state has against him, because that would be part of the testimony required for a bond hearing.
All right. Martin Savage, thank you, Martin. I want to bring in our legal analyst, Sunny Hostin. She's joining us from New York. Sunny, we just talked to Martin about what we can expect. We know that we will see George Zimmerman before the judge here. Is it possible that if he gets bond that he could actually walk today, or is it likely that he's going to be back in jail?
I think that's unlikely, and that's because he's been charged with second-degree murder, and that's a non-bondable offense. And that's because second-degree murder exposes him to a penalty, a maximum penalty of life in prison. And so unless the prosecutor and the defense team have agreed on a bond package, they would have to have a hearing called an Arthur hearing to determine whether or not bond is appropriate. And at that hearing, the government would have to show that bond isn't appropriate, and then the defense would have the opportunity to go over several things, like whether or not George Zimmerman has ties to the community. We know he does. Whether or not he's a flight risk. He did turn himself in. I think that's helpful. And whether or not he's a danger to the community. And so I suspect, Suzanne, that all of that won't happen today if the prosecutor again and the defense team have not agreed on a bond. And this is a very high-profile case and very serious charges. they will have to deal with all of those issues at a separate hearing. So I suspect today perhaps what we will hear is the judge read the charges to George Zimmerman. He will not enter a plea. That's for an arraignment, which will happen a couple of weeks later. And then we may discuss bond.
Is it possible, you think, Sonny, in light of the fact that so many people have heard this case, it seems so polarizing, that they will be able to get an objective jury?
I do believe that, you know, and so many people have been asking me that question, not only in this case, but in a lot of high-profile cases. And the bottom line is you're not going to find someone that hasn't heard about this case, I think, especially in Florida. This is an international, this is part of our international discourse at this point. But I don't know, Suzanne, that you want someone that hasn't heard about this case, someone that's been living under a rock. You want someone that perhaps knows a bit about the case, but is still willing to be fair and impartial. I believe in our jury system, and if this goes to trial, they'll be able to find 6 jurors, because in Florida it's 6, not 12 on this count, that can be fair and impartial.
And Sonny, I have to ask you this, because it really was, it was quite interesting what happened this morning here. We saw Trayvon Martin's mother, Sabrina Fulton, say on cable television earlier today, a lot of people who are watching this, that she believes that her son's killing was an accident. And she said it just got out of control here. Does that actually help George Zimmerman's case that he acted in self-defense?
Look, I don't think it helps his case. I don't think it hurts his case. I've met Sabrina Fulton. She's everything that you see on television. She's elegant. She's lovely. But she's also a mother who's grieving. What mother wants to believe that someone killed their son with ill will, with ill intent? Of course she believes it's an accident, but she's not a lawyer. She's not privy to all the evidence that this government has against George Zimmerman. So I think we should just take her words at face value. She's a grieving mother. It's her take on it. She perhaps wants to believe that this was an accident. That's not a legal term.
Right.
And again, she's a lovely, lovely woman.
I guess I'm wondering, though, if Zimmerman's attorneys, can they use that to their advantage, the fact that she sees it or hopes that it's an accident?
I don't think so. I mean, she's not a witness in this case. She wasn't there on February 26th when her son was murdered. And so I don't think they can use that. Of course, you know, oftentimes victims are consulted by the prosecution in terms of how they feel about a case, how they would feel about bond. But it's the government that tries this case and makes the decision.
All right, Sonny, thank you very much. She is a lovely woman. We've spoken to her a couple times on the show here. Obviously, she is
really
a very, very stressful time for that family, and they simply want to see justice done. We'll see how this plays out. Thank you, Sonny. Appreciate it.